Hey guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 build guide. Today's build is one of the best hunter builds out there for high-end content, whether it's in solo gameplay or with a fire team. But before we get into the build today, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more Destiny 2 content like this. Thank you in advance. Starting off, we are on the hunter class, rocking specifically bottom tree tether. I'll get into in a little bit why bottom tree versus top tree and how you can actually switch between that based on playstyles, and also why specifically I'm making this build in relation to the upcoming ability changes for specifically the hunter subclass. We are on bottom tree tether, aka Way of the Pathfinder on Night Stalker, mainly taking advantage of our Vanish and Smoke ability as well as the other abilities found in the subclass that help us get our charges back extremely quickly. We're combining this today with our exotic Omnioculus. For those who don't know, you gain a second smoke bomb charge and have damage resistance when you're actually invisible, and when you make an ally invisible, they gain damage resistance as well, and you gain melee energy back. And in 3-man, especially 6-man activities, you can effectively chain this infinitely and always stay invisible along with some of your teammates. The subclass on its own allows us to go invisible quite often. With multiplayer activities, this only increases that effect and increases our survivability just by being invisible. What this build does is complement this idea of damage reduction and visibility with survivability outside of that, while limiting combatants' ability to fight us effectively. To prove this, I use this build to solo a master level Nightfall 2 weeks in a row with minimum difficulty, and it's definitely one of my favorite builds for higher end content on Hunter, specifically if I'm doing anything solo. Getting into the details of the build, let's start off on our helmet. On our helmet, we're using Protective Light, which is one of my favorite mods in the game, essentially granting us a period of 50% damage reduction when our shields are broken, and for every stack of Charged with Light that we have, the duration of this 50% damage reduction increases. We're also rocking dual sword finders just because I'm rocking Lament with this build. I'll go into that in a little bit, but you'll see why as time goes on, and definitely making sure that you always have sword ammo is a must for a build like this. Onto our gauntlets, I'm rocking Powerful Friends and Momentum Transfer to ensure we get our dodge back as soon as possible, something that'll help us get our smoke bombs back upon cast, and Momentum Transfer gives us plenty of melee energy back on our grenade ticks, which if you remember, already happens on our subclass, and our grenades last longer, providing us more ticks. I'm personally rocking Vortex nades, but if you prefer another kind, feel free to rock that too. Also, just a quick note, I am using Gambler's Dodge to refresh our melee charge when we dodge near enemies. With that being said, part of the reason I'm rocking Powerful Friends is due to not having the best hunter armor for PvE and being quite low on Master and materials at the moment, so if you can manage really high mobility without something like Powerful Friends, using another mod to help gain stacks of Charged with Light is always a good option, or there's also the Void Elemental Well mod, or something like Well of Tenacity, also works really well with this build. Onto our chest piece, Omnioculus, I'm rocking Reaping Wellmaker, which essentially after activating our class ability, or dodging in this case, our next weapon final blow guarantees a Void Well to spawn. Now, this is something absolutely fantastic as we're going to be chaining this up very effectively and very quickly using this build. And like I said, if you want to swap out something like Powerful Friends, if you already have max mobility for the fastest dodge cooldown, something like Bountiful Wells even would also work with something like this. I'm also rocking a Sword Reserve and would recommend an accompanying resist mod for whatever activity you're attempting. Onto our boots. The first mod we have is Lucent Blade, which is one of the best mods in the game for sword-based play. With Lucent Blade, when you have stacks of Charged with Light, the mod will consume one stack and give you a 35% boost to sword damage for 5 seconds, and its secondary perk allows our recharge rate to increase by 25%, which is extremely noticeable in PvE. We're then combining this with Invigoration, which gives us melee charge energy when we pick up an Orb of Power, and a Sword Scavenger perk. These all benefit our playstyle extremely well, and like I said, I'll get more into the sword in a second. Finally, onto our cloak. Our first mod is Passive Guard, which is one of my favorite mods in the entire game, essentially granting us damage resistance when holding on to our sword while near combatants. Before I break down the total interaction between Passive Guard, Omnioculus, and Protective Light, we're also using Elemental Charge, which grants us 2 stacks of Charged with Light for each Void Orb we pick up, and again, you'll see with how the other mods and how this plays, this essentially chains everything together. We dodge, we get our abilities back from it through Gambler's Dodge, we also then can generate these Void Wells, which grant us stacks of Charged with Light, which can play into Protective Light or Lucent Blade, depending on the situation. All the while, we're getting grenade energy and melee energy, going invisible, and granting the buffs that come with invisibility as well, all while playing on the natural synergy of this subclass. Again, if you wanted to rock this something like 6 Coyote and Top Tree Tether, you can totally do that, as I would actually prefer that for solo play, but just based on how often often you can actually go invisible, especially with upcoming changes to dodges coming up. Something like this is insanely good, especially with a fire team, which is why I'm showing it off to you guys today. Before we get on to our weapons, I'm going to go over the damage resistances for all the mods and all the different effects that we have going on. We primarily have three sources, which is our exotic Omnioculus, passive guard, and protective light. For Omnioculus, through testing and through data dives, it seems like Omnioculus's damage reduction brings you to the same resistance as 10 resilience in PvE, which is a 13% overall reduction when invisible. In lower level content, this really doesn't affect anything, as when you're invisible, all ads lose sight of you, excluding tracking projectiles like Cabal rockets or Taken orbs. But in higher level content, where there's a lot of area of effect and concussive damage that can melt you or kill you instantly, it's nice to be able to take a few more hits from this. This then can stack with passive guard when we have our sword out from nearby combatants, which grants a total of 50% damage reduction whether or not we're invisible. And again, when we are invisible, that 50% will stack with that 13%. Finally, protective light does additionally stack, so if we were invisible and our shields are down, we then get that 13% reduction of damage from our invisibility, plus that 50% duration of damage reduction based on how many stacks of charged with light we consumed from protective light, along with the 50% passive guard buff just for having our sword out when combatants are nearby. As you can probably tell with all this math, testing was really hard to see how well this actually stacks, or if they would even stack and to what extent. But through overall testing and gameplay, it is extremely noticeable whenever you have all three of these things procced versus when you don't in the exact same activity. So as far as further testing goes for me, these do all work together. Of course, with PvE, there's going to be some inconsistencies with damage taken and how various area of effect attacks deal on your Guardian. In high-end content, like the background gameplay you're seeing here, this is incredibly noticeable in high-risk scenarios where there's a lot of concussive damage being thrown at you. If you wanted to go all out on damage reduction though, you can totally rock Well of Tenacity like I stated earlier, which is a 10% approximate damage resistance, similar to my Immortal Titan build last season, and this will in turn stack with Protective Light, and I have no reason to believe it wouldn't stack with Omnioculus and Passive Guard as well then. Like I mentioned earlier, you can also use 6 Coyote with Top Tree, and this build will function very similarly, although you do lose some synergy, but can gen more Void Wells fairly easily, as dodging is the primary mechanic for going invisible with Top Tree Tether. Finally, onto our weapons. I'm using an Ignition Code Grenade Launcher simply for the perk Blinding Nades, but really any grenade launcher with Blinding Nades works extremely well. For exotic, I'm using Lament. You can really use any sword, but with Lament's healing effects, it's extremely nice in high-end PvE. Summed up, as you deal damage, you get Banshee's Wail stacks, which increase your damage and give you slight damage resistance, which again does stack on top of everything else that we talked about earlier. Again, slight values are going to change based on the activity you're doing and what kind of damage you're taking, as well as other modifiers, but I have no reason to believe that this won't additionally stack, as again, whenever all of this is combined versus 1 or 2 or even none of these different effects, the damage taken is extremely noticeable, so I have no reason to believe that this all won't fit together. Plus, as you deal damage, Lament will heal you as well. Although again, this setup works well with any sword, so if you have a Falling Guillotine you love, for example, you can always use that instead of this and rock a different exotic, but I just found that this is the best for higher end content, as again, the healing effect is extremely noticeable. Lament does absolutely insane sword DPS, plus it also deals with barrier champions, which is extremely nice. Again, if you want to use Top Tree Tether with something like 6 Coyote, you can totally do that, nothing wrong with it at all. I just found that this is my preferred playstyle for solo, and it works way better than Top Tree with a fire team. But that's pretty much it for today, guys. As you can see, this whole build is about being invisible as much as possible, and in the brief moments where we aren't, we're dealing as much damage as we can with Lament, which simply tears through everything outside of bosses and the highest end content. Like I said, everything here is extremely beneficial and really easy to use on solo play. It only gets amplified when you're actually playing with a fire team. So if you're looking for a build for your Hunter for Grandmaster, and even Master level raids when challenge modes, this is it for you if you're struggling to survive, as again, going invisible is basically a get out of jail free card in 90% of scenarios. And the synergy with this build on the Oculus and the exotics we're using, as well as the mods, is absolutely crazy. That's pretty much it for today, guys. Let me know what you thought of the build down below in the comments. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe for more content like this, and let me know what you want to see going forward with this channel. Again, the 30th anniversary and Witch Queen is right around the corner. I'm definitely planning on making some more builds and even seasonal guides for content like that comes out, such as dungeon guides, for example. But let me know what you're looking forward to and what you want to see from this channel going forward. But that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.